What up,
Welcome
everybody?
back. Oh my gosh. I've been looking
Back.
forward to this topic. I can't even wait to tell you. You're so excited. You've already read the title, so you already know what it is, but so spoilers are already spoiled.
Absolutely.
How
Yep.
to tell your children about sex. This is a conversation my parents did not have with me. And obviously you can see how well I turned out. Just kidding. I mean, I obviously, but but um but yeah, this is an important conversation. I feel I missed out on a lot because I wasn't introduced to it by anybody. I had to kind of find my own way through that. um and of course I used the help of my peers. And Daniel, I'm sure you have something to say to that too, but this is an important conversation to have with your children, so here's how to do it.
hmm Yeah. Well, it's very interesting because it could be very shelter or secretive kind of act, something you keep away from your children, especially you keep away until a certain age usually, but especially in society, it seems like it's not being brought up.
Well, I think
They have the
there's
schools.
there's
Schools
this
bring it up instead.
big there's this I think it has to do with shame. I mean, your
Absolutely.
parents make it about shame. You end up internalizing that and making it about shame. And then everybody just keeps building these shells of shame around it, right?
Yeah.
So that's
And
the
it's
second step, because the first step is actually hitting subscribe.
and it's
And
not and it's not going to help to ignore it
right.
because sooner or later, man or woman,
Or to
you're going to
expect.
have an experience sexual desire. It's just born in you. Like
Yeah.
that's just what you're gonna do. And the question is, well, what the hell do I do with this sexual desire? Like how do I
As a
interpret?
kid. Yeah.
And on top of that, there's a ton of judgment, especially when you don't talk about it. When you don't
Right.
talk about it, I don't know what you're thinking about my sexual desire. I mean, today you have all these different like different kinds of sexual like I could like women, I could like men, I could like both. It's like what the heck? And then you start judging yourself from it because you don't talk to anybody, you don't know what to
Well,
think
and
of
you're
it.
young, you're maturing,
On
you
top of
don't
that, you
know
have like
yourself.
yeah, you have it's all different. You have like different types of desire. Oh, I like women with these attributes or women with those attributes. It's like, well, you have these desires that they seem like they come from nowhere, right? And then you can start judging yourself. I think there's a big thing with judging yourself for desires that you didn't choose. And
Right.
and it's very important to recognize that and to be able to openly talk about it.
While you're being acted on externally by other people who are expecting you to have certain desires, and they're not even clearly placing those expectations down. They're just implying that because you are a guy, you have to like women or vice versa, right? And those are just the pressures of an external environment, very normal in life, but as a child you don't really know that. And and of course, a lot of times, the problem we're trying to address here is, as an adult, most adults aren't clearly addressing that. They're just placing their own expectations and opinions on you, which is also normal, right?
Hmm. I think you froze up. But anyways, that conversation,
Can you hear me?
now I can, yeah.
You're out here trying to grow and learn, and on top of trying to grow and learn, there's all these external pressures that are
You're
building
still
up on.
here. I can hear you.
Okay, great. Um, and then as a parent, expecting someone else to do this for you is not a good path either. What do they say? They say if you want a job done right, you do it yourself. So expecting the schools to teach your children about sex, that's just, come on, you know better than that. And expecting other people to teach your children about sex, you know better than that too. It's up to
Mhm.
you to do it, especially if you want it.
Now you froze.
So
But yeah, you froze for just a second. But sex can be taken in a good way and a not so good way. And so it's important to what I love to talk about is redirect that kind of desire. And you start to see it like you can start to see it in this negative way. Oh, this is a bad thing. But there's so much beauty to it. And it just depends what you focus on, right? It could be seen in a judgmental way. It can be seen in a way where it's like, oh, I'll just take advantage of this. Or it can be seen in a way where you put it into a loving relationship, or you put it into a committed relationship, or you put it into your work, or you enjoy your desires in a appropriate way. It's like when you're young, you don't know about this stuff. You don't know how to interpret it. So having a parent there as a guide to help you is crucial, and it's going to be beneficial.
Okay, so what would you, your kid is going through puberty, they're going to experience these, right? Girl, boy, what would you say to them?
I would talk about it openly. That's the first thing. It's like you don't have to make this awkward.
Yeah.
You can talk, and I think in most cases it will be, because parents don't even have a comfortability with their own sexual desire. So maybe first and foremost, learn to see your sexual desire non-judgmentally, especially in a religious culture. It could be seen very negatively, and it's not about seeing it always in a negative, positive way. It's just seeing it as it is. Like I said, don't judge something you
Right. It's a
haven't,
reality.
don't judge a desire you haven't chose.
Yeah.
And so it's like freely talk about it. And when you feel like it's the right time to talk about it with your kids. And it could be early, like it could be high school, it could be a little after. I wouldn't wait too long, because no matter what, your kids are already
Growing up.
experiencing those desires, like
Yeah.
after middle school, high school, maybe even earlier than that. So it's like, be able to talk about it earlier, be able to have it be a conversation. I don't think it should ever be, oh, this is how it is, right? This is it. Like, let me just teach you, sit down, you listen. It's like, you want
Right.
it essentially to be something you communicate back and forth with. Your kid has questions, they talk to you, and you talk back, instead
Well,
of,
the
let me
importance
give
of
you a
that is
lecture
you want
about
there to be
sex.
comfortability. You want there to be comfortability about this subject so that there isn't shame, because that's when people start hiding stuff. Um, but just because there's comfortability doesn't mean that sex itself is, that you're teaching that sex itself is okay, right? Because like I
Absolutely.
don't support promiscuity, but and you don't, if that's something you're concerned about as a parent, you don't have to support that either. So just because you're comfortable talking about sex doesn't mean you're promoting promiscuity.
Yeah, that's something I definitely want to
That's,
cover.
I
So
feel like there's definitely this huge disconnect there where people think that just because you'll talk about sex, it means you're willing to tell your children that they can have sex with anybody, and that is not the same thing.
yep. Nope. No way.
But like Daniel said, coming to your children to tell them about this and to talk about this isn't you laying down your opinions and saying sex is wrong, you're not allowed to have sex. Like that, how that doesn't work. I know that doesn't work firsthand because that's what my parents did. My parents were like, nobody will have sex in my house, in my yard. I was like, the fuck I will. It's like doing drugs or drinking.
Hmm. And then
Your
also
kids are curious.
laying down your opinion can be very well, that can add more judgment to your kids,
Yeah.
because they're like, well, wait a second, my parents think this about it. Well, what if I want to do this? Like, and then, they start focusing on it, and it's just, and then they don't want to bring it up, because if
I
if you
think
if you're very opinionated, I guess, then you you can sense that even as a kid, and you don't want to disagree.
I think the
So
place to start from is from your own value system as a parent. But that means you have to be clear about your value system. And then you can move on to your wants. But when I say your wants, I mean not your don't wants. I mean your wants, right? You can say, son, daughter, this is what I value, right? I value loving relationships. Hopefully you can see that in your mother and I, or whatever. Um, you know, I want my children, I want you to grow up to where you're not ashamed to talk about sex, right? And to where you can come to me with any of these questions, right? Your wants, not your don't wants again, right? I don't want my daughter to be a whore. I don't want my son to, you know, dance with every woman sexually in town, right? Not your don't wants. Come with your wants, right? Because that focuses your mind on what you do want to achieve, which moves you towards what you're focusing on, right? And that teaches your children to do the same thing, right? So instead, speaking, what I would say, I would be like, I want my children to know they can come to me about anything, any sexual questions they have,
Mhm.
anything to do with their sexuality, anything to do with their urges, whatever it is. I want my son or my daughter to value loving relationships, right? Committed relationships, relationships where even if there's sex involved, you guys understand the respect that it deserves as a, in my belief, right, in my value system, a sacred act, right? And so the important thing is to, one, know your own values, and two, come to it from a place of your wants and not your don't wants, right? Because again, you don't want to be like, I don't want my daughter to be a whore, because that doesn't put the focus on a good subject. You want to say, I want my children to value A, B, and C, or to someday have A, B, and C, right?
Yeah,
Very
no, that's
distinct difference there. Very big.
no, that's good right there because that allows for little judgment, or it's hard to judge when you just, you know, when you say that.
And it will,
I
and
value, yeah.
to express your wants,
Yeah.
right? Not your don't wants, to express what you want is to be vulnerable with your children. And it teaches your children they can be vulnerable. You can say, you might not know this, little Johnny, but I want you to one day, this is what I would hope for you. There's no pressure. You can do your own thing, but this is what I would want. I'm going to be vulnerable and be clear about my hopes and express my love through vulnerability about what I would want from my little boy Johnny there. And your children are going to see that, right? They're not going to know they're seeing that. It's going to be very subconscious most of the time. You're not going to realize just how powerful your words are. A lot of that's very, subconscious too. But the reality is it sets in a lot deeper than people think about it.
Mm-hmm. I want to reinforce something you said, not on any of these podcasts, but something a long time ago when we were talking. And you said this was about, and this is more about not like hiding sex from your kids, because it might be brought up at a very young age. And you said,
I don't even remember this, folks.
You said to say that this is something that you do when you're married. Because I brought it first. I was like, this is something adults do. And you're like, no, not really, because that brings about the wrong idea. That brings about, well, I just want to be an adult. But like, there's much more to it.
That's true. The specifics are important. And again, that's why you express your wants, right? Because saying this is something you do when you're married is, like you just pointed out, is very specific. It's not just about being an adult. It's about being a mature individual in a committed relationship. And that is much more specific than being an adult. And if you want that for your children, you have to be very specific about what you want, which is why you really have to know what you value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. But that's like the biggest thing here is talk about it with your kids, and definitely don't try to hide it.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you try to hide it, all it does subconsciously to your kids is say, what is that? It brings their attention to that.
Yeah.
And then in a
more
judgmental way than you would want, because then
scarcity creates value, and
why?
And mystery creates curiosity.
Absolutely.
But very true. That's so true, because you guys should keep track of all the times I forget what I was going to say. But yeah. So it's just a normal conversation. You have to treat it like a normal conversation, because that's all it is, right? When you make a big deal out of something, everybody else enters that energy and makes a big deal out of it too, unless they're very, very comfortable in their own skin and know how to separate from that, which most people aren't. So if you as a parent make a big deal out of sex, your children are going to make a big deal out of sex, which means they're going to hide it, or they're going to whatever direction they go with it, they're going to make a big deal out of it. So if you can learn how to engage in any conversation coming from a place of what you want and what's important to you, and understanding it's just another conversation, right? It's important, but there's no reason to get goosebumps or get anxious or tremble over it. That's an energy you're creating that other people are going to feel and step into. And so to be able to approach your children, right? Because they're your children, they're younger than you, right? It's amazing how stuff like that will make us so afraid and anxious. But to be able to approach these situations and be like, this is just another conversation that I'm going to have with my child. This is a conversation that is important to have. It shouldn't be neglected. But it's just another part of life. It's like dying. Like, yeah, nobody wants to talk about dying with their children, but guess what? That's because you think nobody wants to talk about dying with their children isn't a conversation to have. But that's not true. There's no reason you can't talk about death, sex, birth, buying a car. Like, stop avoiding difficult conversations.
Right.
They're all just
That's a great
conversations.
example right there. Yeah. That is really good.
Money. Oh my gosh. If people talked about money to me, I mean, my parents did a pretty good job of that. There's still a lot I don't know, which is a reality for most things. But
Yeah.
when you don't talk about these things, there is a consequence.
Absolutely. And I think, and especially with sex, there's so much damn secretiveness, shame behind that, because it could get very personal. And
I think that was the hope for like the sexual revolution in a lot of people's minds. In some people's minds, I think there was an agenda. But in the people who followed suit with it, I think their hope was that it would normalize the conversation about sex, which backfired because there was a bigger agenda. But that should be the reality for anything, is normalizing these serious topics to a level where it's okay to talk about them, where nobody has to be shamed over talking about them, right? Doesn't mean you have to partake in them, but even speaking about sex is this very shameful thing. And it's like that, I think that was the hope for a lot of people in movements like the sexual revolution, was that there wouldn't be shame, that women could have sex with a partner and not be shamed for it, right? That ended up becoming a big thing about promiscuity instead, which there shouldn't be shame in that, but there should be self-control. But that's a little off topic. But basically normalizing it is what I'm saying. Normalizing these conversations as important and okay to have. They're facts, they're parts of life. They're parts of life.
There's positives to it as well as negatives.
Yeah, right. There are ways to not engage in it, and there are ways to engage in it. There are things you should do with sex, and there are things you shouldn't do with sex. But never speaking about it and judging people for their mistakes that's not going to help, right?
Heck no. All right.
Final thoughts?
That's it. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Yeah. And hit like if this was a conversation your parents never had with you.
All right. Peace.
And anyway, hit like anyway. Peace.